Welcome to Everything About Web. My name is Jamie Kavanaugh, and this is the Column CSS Layout 8-Hour Day Part 2 tutorial. So this is where we left off in Part 1. If we look at what we have here, we'll see that we've got our content for the most part in our page, but we need to do our styling. So there's a couple things I'm going to do before moving forward. One is that if we look at the existing page, you'll notice that we have content in our 4 columns right here. This I've called the featured section. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the content, the text, into these sections. So what we would do here is I've got my 8-hour day. Let me actually do this a little different way here. Let's look at our desktop. So here we've got our 8-hour day folder that has our information that we need to build this site. And notice that in our source file folder, we have a text file. So this could be the file that the client delivered to us that contains all the text for the site. This is the text that we laid out into our Photoshop document. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this text into our HTML. So the first paragraph goes into our featured one. So I want to make sure that I'm in the right place here, and let's see if I can use my paste special. So I copied it from the text document, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. And notice when I select paste special that Dreamweaver adds some of the markup to it. So I may have to go in here and change some of it, but at least it's giving me a good start. So I'm going to go back and copy this second paragraph of text, which goes in our second featured. Now notice that I'm actually clicking in the design view, and notice that my cursor is showing up in the right location in the code view. When I'm in the design view, that's when I'm going to be able to use this paste special. So I'm clicking in the design view, selecting paste special, and making sure that Dreamweaver is adding my text with structure. And you'll see that that means that Dreamweaver adds some of the markup to it, which is just going to save me some time. So again, I'm clicking over in the design view. Let me copy my text here. I'm going to go up to paste special. Okay, and then the last one is for this feature 4. Go ahead and copy this text and go ahead and paste this in. Okay, great. So now I've got that content in there. So that's good. There's a couple other things I need to do, and let's just go back and take a look at where we're at again. Okay, so again, now we used some code that we had used before, and we need to go in and add some dimensions that are different based on this design. And we know what our dimensions are for this project because of the Photoshop file. So if we look at our PSD, at our Photoshop file, it's really easy for us to know all of our dimensions because we've laid it out in this design comp. So I know that the width of my project here is 1050 pixels, but in my CSS, I don't have that defined. So I'm going to go back to my HTML, and in my wrapper div, I'm going to go ahead and make sure my width is 1050. Okay. So now the width is the width of this design. And I'm going to go ahead and actually do something else to the wrapper. I have a background color in my wrapper, and again, I know this because of the Photoshop file. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in. It's F6, F6, F4. And make sure you have the pound sign before your hexadecimal number. Okay, so that's just creating this very sort of off-white background in my wrapper. And I also know that I've got that same color that I want to add to the body of my HTML. So I'm going to go in there and edit my background of my body by putting in that same color. So that's F6, F6, F4. Okay, so let me preview this. So that just added, I don't know if you can see, but it just added that sort of grayish white background to the body of my entire, or the background of my entire browser window. That's what happens when I add a color to my body. And then I also added it to the wrapper. Okay, my header. Let's look at what my properties are for my header. It's 150, which is actually correct, so I'm all good to go there. My navigation that's inside of my header needs to be styled. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little positioning and some width to my navigation div. So again, I've selected my nav div. I'm going to go in here, and I know it's 400 pixels wide, and again, I know that from the Photoshop document. I actually want to float this to the left, okay, because I've got that secondary navigation that's going to sit on the right-hand side. So I'm going to float this to the left. And then I'm going to add some margin on my left-hand side. It's 43 pixels. Okay, so I'm having that actually move over from the left 43 pixels. And then there's some padding on the top. And I'm going to state, again, 15 pixels, and I know that from my Photoshop document. Okay, so we still have an issue because our navigation isn't lining up correctly. So we're going to add a new, we're going to define a new rule. We need to define some properties for the list tag of our navigation. So in order to insert this new style, I'm going to go up to Format, CSS Styles, and say New. And I'm going to select Compound. And what I'm want to create some styling for is my navigation div, but it's my list in my navigation. So I am going to specify nav and then li. So that's the list tag in my nav div. And want to make sure that it's being defined in my style.css, and say OK. And what I'm going to define here is I'm going to define a bunch of things. I'm going to define my font family. So my navigation is in Arial. I'm going to do the color, and the color is F6F. Well, actually, it's that same color. So F6, F6, F4, sort of that whitish color. And my font size is 11 pixels. And I'm going to also do a little bit, I'm going to go over to my block category, and I'm going to do a little bit of letter spacing. Okay, this is just going to create a little bit of space between the letters of my words in my navigation. So I'm going to specify it as 0.15 ems. And I'm going to display it as inline. And I don't know if we've talked about display inline, but this is important in order to have the navigation display so that it is inline, so that it's all on one line. If I don't define display as inline, my navigation will, continue to be vertical, and I want it to be horizontal navigation. So display inline. And then I'm going to add some padding on my right of 33 pixels. So when I do that, there we go. So this is great because we've got our navigation now. It's horizontal. We've got some issues because the color is defaulting to just the blue underline. So we're going to have to define our pseudo element a link and a hover because we don't want it to default to this. So I'm going to go back over to my CSS Styles, and I'm going to add a new style. And this is going to be for my nav div again. It's for my list tag, but it's the A element. So it's for the link in my list. I want to define the property. And what I want to define is I want to define the color as the color that it is without a link. So the same color that I used in the Nav Li, I'm going to define it as that, and I'm going to remove the text decoration so that there's no underline. And if I say OK there, we'll notice that that has changed my nav here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a hover because I do want there to be a change of color when the user hovers over or rolls over the navigation. So I'm going to go back up to CSS Styles New. And for Nav Li, and this is for hover, okay? And I just want to mention that if you click on this little drop down, the different pseudo elements are listed here. So if you forget what they are, and this is the order that they do need to be defined in. So it should be defined list, visited, hover, active. Okay, I'm going to define just a color change, and it's going to be this #333 dark gray color. Okay, so if we preview this and see what we have done here, you'll see that we have now our rollover. Okay, so now our navigation is functioning and it is in the right position. So let's move on to our secondary nav and start styling the rest of this header content. Okay. So now with our secondary nav, we're going to do some of the same steps. We're going to go to our secondary div, and we're going to define the width of it, which is 365. Again, we know this from our Photoshop document. We're going to float this to the left. We're going to add some padding on the top of 15 pixels. And we're going to add a margin on the left of 50 pixels. Okay, so 365 floating left, padding on the top of 15, and the margin from the left is 50. Okay. And now we need to go in and style the navigation, which basically means having to style the the list tag, the li tag for the secondary nav. So I'm going to go back up to Format, CSS Styles, New. Okay, and this is secondary li. Okay, oops. Okay, so the list tag for the div called secondary. And here I'm going to define some of the same things, my font family, the size, which is also 11 pixels. The color is a little different, so this is 642512. Notice to make sure you have the hexadecimal. And then I also have letter spacing here, so 0.15 ems again, and I'm displaying inline because this is going to be horizontal nav. And then I also have some padding. I've got padding on the right of 20 pixels. Fantastic. We've got the same issue. Our text is defaulting to the standard blue underline, so we need to go in here and define our colors, our styling for our LIA for all of our link, and also our pseudo element hover. So let's go back up to Styles, CSS Styles New. So for our A element, for any links that are in our list tag for our secondary div, our secondary nav, we're going to define a color. So we want it to be that same color. So that was 642512. And we do not want text decoration, so we're going to select none. Okay, and we're going to do our hover. So go back up to CSS Styles, New. Okay, and here we're going to define that we want it to be that same color. Oops, sorry, actually not the same color. We're going to define a different color. So we're going to go back to sort of that whitish color. And we do not want, oh, sorry. And yeah, we're just going to have it change color. Okay, so now if we preview this, fantastic. So we've got our positioning, our color changes. This is great. So now we can move. I'm just going to close some of these windows here. Now we can move to our blog div, our logo, and our studio. So with the blog div, again, I'm going to select on it, and I'm going to float this to the left. So it sits right next to the nav and the secondary divs. And I'm going to give this a little bit of a margin here. So margin from the left of 75. Okay. So here we'll see that, let's just look at this. Great. So now we can see that we've got our blog image over here. One thing that we need to do to this is this will link to a blog page. So I'm going to select on it and go to my properties window and add my link. So this page is going to be called blog.html. Okay. So that's going to have a link. Okay, so now moving down to my logo and my studio text, I'm going to edit my logo div. And here I'm going to add a float to the left. The width of this logo is 560 pixels. I have some padding. On the left I have 43 pixels, and you'll remember that that's the same padding on the left that I had for my nav, because they need to be in alignment with one another. And then I also have some padding on the top, and it's just 10 pixels. Fantastic. Okay. Now the studio div, I'm going to float that to the left also. And I'm going to add some padding to the left and the top. So from the left, I want my studio image to show up 150 pixels from the left. And again, there's that padding on the top of 10 pixels. There we go. So let's take a look at where our header is. Fantastic. Look at that. So we're pretty much done with the header. So we've got everything laid out, and we've got our styling done for that part of our page. So let's move on to the content. And the first thing I'm going to do in my content div is just it has a background color of white. So I'm going to go in here and edit it and make sure that I have that, which I do. So that's already defined as FFF, which is for white. Okay. My main photo, if we look at the original design, we'll notice that there is some space between the header and the main photo, and this is 40 pixels. We know that from the Photoshop document. So we're going to go ahead, and for our main photo div, we're going to edit it, and we're going to add 40 pixels of padding on the top. There we go. Great. Okay. And now we're going to do a few things to the div below our main photo called featured. And featured is the div that contains those 4 columns. So there's actually a div here. You can probably see it in this little markup that I did. So there's this featured div, that's the blue, or sorry, that's the content, and then inside is the red, that's the featured, and then there's the columns that sit inside the featured. And notice that I've got these verticals, right? Now those verticals pose a little bit of a problem because as hopefully you guys know, if I created those verticals using a border for my divs, the height of the div would be only as high as the content, because by just their nature, divs will only expand in height based on how much content is inside. So what would happen is we'd always have verticals here that were sort of stopped at different points because of the amount of content. So we always want that to look we always want those verticals to be of the same height. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to put in our background of our featured div a very small image that is going to repeat, and it's going to create our verticals for us. And if we go to Photoshop here, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and open that image to show you what it looks like. So it's the image called Verticals, and it's very small. It's only a pixel high. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but notice right here, see that little pixel? That's what's creating the vertical. There's 3 of them in this file. Okay, so as those repeat, they're going to create that line. So they're just repeating, I'm just repeating this 1 pixel image. So let's just take a look and see what happens here. So let's go to our featured div and edit it. And we're going to make sure it is defined as 1050 because that's the width. We're also going to define the right and the left as auto so that it floats within that content div. And then we're going to add our background image, which is that verticals image. And we're going to repeat it on our y-axis, so it will repeat going, vertical. And then the other thing that we're going to do is for, let's see, where are we going to find that? So under positioning, where it says overflow, we're going to set that at auto. And the reason we're going to do that is it's going to collapse if we don't do that, and we want it to allow the overflow automatically. So in order to prevent it from collapsing and prevent it from or make it possible for us to see the 4 columns, the 4 divs that we're going to be placing inside of it, we need to make sure we've got that overflow auto. Okay, so let's see if there's we do need to add a little margin also to our featured div. So we're going to go to our box and add a little margin on the top of 40 pixels. Okay, so you can see how that sort of dropped down right there. And you're also going to see, oops, you're also going to see that we've got our verticals now here, right? Okay, so let's just look at this. Okay, so there are verticals, so it's just repeating. Okay, so that's what we wanted. They're just going to be as long or as high as our columns. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here. Okay. All right, so now we need to define our columns, which are called feature 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we want to go in here and define a few properties for each one of them. So for featured 1, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to float this to the left. I'm going to give it a width of 210. And we're going to have a margin on the left of 40 pixels and on the right of 20. Okay. For feature 2, oops. Sorry about that. I'm going to add some very similar properties. So I'm going to go to box and float this to the left. The width of this one is also 210. My margin on my left is going to be 20. My margin on my right is going to be 20. For 3, feature number 3, I'm going to edit this, and again my float is going to be to the left, and my margin for this is going to be 20 pixels on the right and on the left, and the width of this one is also 210. And then for number 4, this is also going to float to the left. The width is 210. And I've got a margin on the left of 20 pixels, but here on the right I've got 30. So I have a little bit more on this very last column here. Okay. Okay, so let's look and see where we're at. Okay. So we've got our columns and we've got our content in there. Now we have a little bit of an issue because if we look at the original design, go here, notice that the vertical is only starts right where the content starts, right? So it shouldn't start right underneath our photo. So we're going to need to take a look and see why we've got a little bit of an issue right there. So let's go back to our code here. Okay, and this is why we're having a problem. So to our, this is our featured div. Notice that we added padding on the top of 40, and what we need to do is add it to the margin, not the padding. And watch what happens when we do that. So when we change it from 40 pixels of padding on the top of that featured div to margin instead, and we preview it, there we go. We fixed our problem because padding is margin's actually moving that entire div. Okay, so padding isn't the right property to use in order to create this space between our main photo and our featured div. Okay, so that needed to be margin top 40 instead of padding top 40. Okay. Problem solved. Excellent. Let's keep going. So now we could go ahead and do some styling for our content that's in these 4 columns. So let's go back to our HTML. We did a paste special, and Dreamweaver did some of the work for us, but we're actually going to need to go in here and do some editing because we want to use our heading tags, and we're going to add a heading 1 tag to the headings of all of our our content in our columns. So I'm going to go in here and change these paragraph tags to an H1 tag. Then we do have our paragraph of text, and then we've got our date down here. And I don't want this to be a paragraph tag because I want to go in and give that date content a special style. So I'm going to use the H5 tag for those because an H5, a heading 5 tag, basically means text that's a type of heading but smaller than an H1. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and make all those changes. So I'm changing my heading of my content in all of my columns to the H1 tag because currently they're a paragraph tag. I'm leaving the paragraph content between the paragraph tags, and then the date content I'm basically going to be doing that using the H5 tag, the heading 5 tag. Okay, so just gonna change this up a little bit. Okay, and you can see here in our we're getting some of the default styling. So a heading tag always is going to kind of be bold and bigger. So now we can go in and change all of that pretty easily again with our CSS. So I'm going to add the styling for the H1 tag for the featured div. So going up to CSS Styles, New. Oops. So it's the div called Featured, and it's the H1 tag. And I want to do it for featured and not do it for feature 1, because if I do it for feature 1, I'll have to do it for feature 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I do it for the entire featured div, then I'll only need to do it one time. And it will affect those 4 other divs, feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, and feature 4, because they're nested inside of the featured div. So I'm using Georgia for my font family. The color of my heading text is E94235. The font size is 14 pixels. I'm going to reduce the font weight to 100 because right now it's going bold and I actually don't want it to be bold. So by defining font weight as 100, that's going to eliminate the boldness of it. And then I'm going to have some padding on the bottom of 10 pixels and padding on the top of 10 pixels. And notice that it has changed all the headings in those 4 columns. And so now I'm going to move on to the doing the paragraphs and then finally the H5. So going back up to CSS Styles, New. So this is the paragraph in the featured div. And the font family here is still Georgia. The color is this pound 333. My font size is 12 pixels. I have a line height, so I have some leading here so that my line height is 18. And then I've got padding on the right of 30 pixels. Fantastic. And then I'm going to do my H5, which is going to style my date. So I'm going to go up to Format, CSS Styles, New. And for my H5, the font family is different. It's Arial, so I'm going to specify that. My color is B198. And I've got a smaller font size. It's actually just 10 pixels. Again, I want to reduce the bold, so I'm going to specify 100 as my font weight. 100 is the lightest, 900 is the most bold. And I'm also going to pad the top and the bottom with 10 pixels. There we go. Let's see where we're at. Fantastic. Look at that. Oh, we've got a little issue here. Now looking at it, what my guess would be is that I did not add the H5 to that. So let's check it out. Oh. Okay, this is why you want to make sure you're not being slappy like I just was. I've got an extra P in there. Let me delete that. Okay. Okay, so there we go. All right, there's a little bit of finessing that we need to do there, but I'm going to go on to the footer and come back to do any more finessing. We also have some links in this text, so we're going to have to do that also. But let's go ahead and do the footer. So let let's see, where's my footer div? There it is. And my height is 50, which is correct. My background color is defined. There's actually a background image in this footer, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. So I should be able to just delete this and go ahead and browse for that footer image. It's similar to the situation with the header, where it has a little bit of gradient in it. Okay, so I've got my footer image in here. And let me just make sure that I also have my clear both. Oops, sorry. Okay, so now I can do some styling of my footer nav and also my copyright. And we've got a very similar issue with styling our footer nav as we did with our main nav. So I'm going to go and select my footer nav first of all, and again I'm going to put in my some of my information about how wide it is and what the margin and padding is and floating left. So very similar to what I did for my main nav. So I'm going to go to box here and put in my width, and it again is 400 pixels. I've got a margin on the left of 43 pixels. My padding on the top is 15, and I'm floating it to the left. Oops. Okay, so now it's sort of positioned, but I need to do the LI, the list tag for my footer nav. Now I've already pretty much done it for my main nav, so and you know I don't like to have to repeat doing the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just copy the CSS from my main nav. I'm going to just copy this, and I'm going to use it for my footer nav because it's going to be pretty similar. And so just notice I'm kind of, you know, trying to put it in the right place. So I put it right here, right below the footer nav. But I need to go in here and change this so that it is for the LI tag of the footer nav. So I'm just gonna paste over this nav, and so now if I click down here, we'll see that I've got a the same styling down here as I do for my top of my my top nav. So some of the things that I have to change, I think there's a color change. But I think that's probably the only difference is the color. So I'm going to go, I could do it a couple different ways. I could just do it right here, or I could go back to my CSS styles and do it there also. So I'm going to go to my footer nav LI and edit it. And instead of this white color, the color that it needs to be is 726 C63. And same thing for my my link color also. So I'm going to change that also to 726 C63. Okay, and you can see that the color has changed. And then my hover is going to be different also. So I'm going to edit that. My hover is again sort of that whitish color, so F6, F6, F4. Okay, so now if I go to my design view, you can see the color change, and when we preview it in Firefox, there we go, we've got the color change. So now it's sort of that lightish gray color, and my rollover, my hover is that whitish color. So now I can go and style my copyright, and I'm going to select it and edit it. I'm going to float this to the right. The width of it is 300 pixels. My padding on the left is 50 pixels. And I'm using, I'm going to add some padding on the top also of 20 pixels. And then I've got to define my font family, which is Arial. And I've got also my font size, which is 10 pixels, and a color. So going back to that 726C63. Oops. And if we preview this, fantastic. There we go. So we've got that on the bottom. Now notice that this is all lowercase. Let me move this up. I don't know if you can see this. It's all lowercase, and in the comp it's uppercase. Now I could control that pretty easily with CSS. So if I go back to my copyright div here and edit it, I could under text transform select uppercase, and if I go ahead and do that, now my copyright will be all in uppercase. So you know, good property to know if you want all your text to be uppercase. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of an issue with my columns here. One is that in the original design there should be some space between my footer and my columns. Okay, so I need to fix that, and I have a way of fixing it. It's adding some line breaks, which, you know, I have to say isn't my favorite way of having to solve an issue like this. But what I could do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to add some line breaks that are basically, let me show you. If I go into my HTML right here, I'm going to add a couple break tags right before the closing of my content div. Okay, and when I do that, I'm going to get a little bit of space in between. Do you see that? So that's kind of what I'm looking for, is to add a little bit of space so that these verticals don't stop right at my footer. And again, the way I did that was by just adding a couple line breaks right here, right before, let me just show you. So here's the content div. It's highlighted in this gray. I added a couple break tags right before this closing tag for my content. And that's going to give me this space right here that you see between my columns and my footer. Now the other issue that I'm having is notice that my date is actually a little high on this third column. So I'm going to just add a couple line breaks again. Let me just see if that fixed it. No, I kind of made it worse. Okay, let me go back. Okay. And let me just delete that. Okay, so I added a little line break between my paragraph here, this right here, and my H5. Now I have a little issue over here, and part of it is that my text isn't really, I really want it to actually fill in more of this space. It shouldn't run this long. So if I go back to my HTML here and take a look at what I've got going on. Part of the problem could be that, let me just move this over so we can kind of see it. Could be that my div here needs to just be a little wider because it's cutting off a lot of my text. So remember that the width for my fourth box, my feature 4, was 210. I think I actually should adjust this because it's looking kind of odd, and even though logically it makes sense to make them the same width, it's really not helping my design. It looks a little funky. So I'm going to go in and make that just, let's say, 10 pixels wider. So I'm going to make that 220. Okay, and let's see if that's better. That is better. That's much better. Okay, so now my last step will be to add the links to my text. And my links are, and again, I know this from my Photoshop document. My link is on this Planet Propaganda. I'm just going to put in a hash mark, but you'd want to go in there and put the actual URL. And what else do I have? Let's go to our original design here. We've got AIGA Wisconsin is also a link. Over here we've got ProxArt Magazine is a link. The Download It is a link. And notice how everything's defaulting to the blue underline, right? We kind of knew that was going to happen. And this is a link. And then our Walker Art Center is a link. So obviously that would go to their website. And we've got the 2011 Minnesota AIGA show. That's a link. Okay, so we don't want those to be blue, clearly. So we're going to go in and we're going to add a style for the A link and the A visited and the A hover for our featured P tag. Okay. So for the paragraph in the featured div, we want to define those properties. So we're going to go up to CSS Styles, New, and for the featured div, the paragraph, the A tag, so anything that's a link, we want to specify that the color is going to be E9 4235, and that's that red color. And we don't want any kind of text decoration, so we're going to say none. Fantastic. And I'm going to do the visited and the hover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the one that I just created, this featured P for the A link, and I'm going to just go to duplicate. Again, here, this is again in the, because I don't want to have to redo stuff, I can duplicate that same rule, and when I do that, I can go back to the one that I just created and edit it. And I want it to have basically the same properties, so I'm going to just leave it. So once I've visited that link, the user should still see the red, and it won't have any underline. Okay, and then let me duplicate that one again, but I'm going to do a hover. And for the hover, so let's go there and just make sure that you go back to your CSS Styles window and make sure you're selecting the right one when you're editing it. Just be careful about that. And for the hover, I want there actually to be an underline. So it's still going to be red, but there will be an underline. So I'm going to check underline instead of none. Great. And let's see where we're at. Okay, so we've got our main navigation working, our secondary navigation working. We've got our content in our columns, and now our links are working. We've got our underlines on our hover, and we also have our bottom navigation working. So the last step would just be taking a closer look and making sure everything is good, but it is looking really good. So congratulations, we've got through the styling, creating the presentation for this project. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how to create a really great design like this, how to lay it out and create a layout that is basically a one column with those 4 columns that give it sort of that magazine format. So thank you so much for watching Everything About the Web. Please visit us on the web at www.everythingaboutweb.com and YouTube and Twitter.